Assalamu alaikum and welcome to KARAMAH's Lunch and Learn program. Today, I will be interviewing Miss Allison Kaiser. Did I say that correctly, Alison?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Good.
Perfect.
The visionary artist and founder of the 99 Clay Vessels project. Allison is a multimedia artist who creates socially engaged artwork about Muslims, Islam, and Islamophobia. She's a resident artist at Red Dirt Studio in Mount Rainier, Maryland, where she's working on a series of artworks in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 in 2021. Previously, she was the outreach coordinator at the Institute for Middle East Studies at the George Washington University, where she designed professional development workshops. She was the director of the Challenge Islamophobia project at Teaching for Change, where she wrote a teaching guide on anti-Muslim bias and shared the lessons in teacher workshops throughout the country. She wrote curricula and facilitated workshops for the Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, Zin Education Foundation Project, Amnesty International, Unity Production Films, and Qatar Foundation International. Earlier in her career, Alison taught the history of social justice movements in a residential abuse therapy program for teenage girls, English as a foreign language for adult learners, US world and Islamic history at a community college, and interreligious adult dialogue courses. She holds a BA in race, class, and gender studies and an MA in history. So, Alison, how, why, and when did you come up with the idea of what eventually grew into the 99 Clay Vessels project?
Well, thank you so much for having me and for your interest in this project. So this project started, I've been a potter for about 10 years, and pottery was always just a place of therapy for me. And I was in a job situation where it was an interfaith job, actually, and sadly, where I was victimized because I was Muslim. And it lasted for about 1.5 years. And, it was a very deeply painful, difficult situation in my life. And I really just kind of took my pain to the clay and, went to my studio and thought, how am I going to work through this situation? And really what just kind of emerged out of me were these 99 clay pots. I just kept meditating on the 99 names of God and thinking about how we, what is the purpose of our religion in our life? It's to help us stay centered. We face all sorts of difficult situations in our life. And it's our religious practice that helps us remember who we want to be, and who we will be when times are good and when they're not good. And so I created these 99 clay vessels, and I fired them in a way where you can see the fire marks. And I really like that because to me, the 99 names represent, there's 99 names of God, right? So just that concept, it is really the concept of Tawheed, that in all of this diversity is the one, and that each of us are these, singular vessels, but together we are all part of this community. And so I had some ideas about what I wanted to do with the pots, and then COVID happened. And then I just started reflecting about the 9/11 anniversary and how there are all of these stories in our communities of people who have been victimized after 9/11, and their names are never included in yearly commemorations. Their stories are not included in multi-million-dollar memorials. And yet these are people who have also, faced the consequences of what happened that day. And so I thought, I want my pots to hold some of those stories. And that's how the project was born.
If I could just ask you to elaborate a little bit, although this recording is made primarily for the use of KARAMAH alumni, but it does go up on our YouTube page, and there are people who may view it who are not Muslims and who don't understand the significance, and in particular, the healing powers that we ascribe to the 99 names of Allah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the 99 names are something that we recite we say them, and it is like literally the vibration of the sound of the voices going through our body that connects us to our faith, that connects us to God, and that provides this healing power. We recite the names in community. Sometimes we focus just on one name, and we do what's called dhikr, a remembrance, something we say over and over again. And this whole project is a dhikr. It was the process of like going and sculpting these 99 vessels that was also a way for me to remember, to remember my faith, remember my core values.
And I'm just curious, as you were working through these pots one at a time, because each one is individual, did you come to associate any one of the names with any one of the pots, or just
No.
wondering, or were you reciting the names from time to time as you were working on the individual pots?
Yes, I was reciting the names, like not throughout, but sometimes I would often like listen to a recitation before I went to sculpt the pots. I didn't associate like a specific name with a specific pot. I wasn't aiming for that level of like, literal
specificity.
Exactly. Looking more for the metaphor, but yeah, I mean, I listen to recitations of the 99 nearly every day in the morning, just to help me like start my day and again, like remember who I want to be.
In the proper frame of mind for the work,
That's right.
Well, it sounds as if this project has really caught fire, but exactly how does it work? The nuts and bolts of it. You mentioned to me once about cohorts. So what is a cohort? How is it formed? Once it's formed, what's the process of sharing and healing? How many cohorts have participated thus far? How do the 99 clay vessels, how does that relate to how they're used by the cohorts?
Yeah, okay, there's a lot of questions in there. So first, there's multiple parts of this project, and I want to make sure that I talk about my collaborators in this. Because the idea of this is that it's a socially engaged project. We're trying to get as many people as possible involved in this, because I think that's where the real healing power lays. It's not just me and my pots, right? It's what the pots will inspire in the community. So the first idea to get the stories is to curate 9 cohorts of 11 women. So that will give us 99 women altogether. And these storytelling workshops are going to be facilitated by a woman whose name is Sabrina Njai. She is a Muslim woman, psychotherapist, and healer. She has a PhD in mind-body medicine. She works with communities, traumatized communities all over the world, both Muslim and non-Muslim. Her presence, I find to be incredibly healing. I mean, she's just an incredibly compassionate woman. And so we had the first cohort, we had the first workshop in June. We just finished. It was kind of our pilot. It was amazing. These women come together. We meet once a week for 5 weeks. For 2 hours each, and really just kind of talk about like, what is the story sitting on you? What is the story that needs to come out of you, that you need to kind of heal from and share in a way. The problem is like we hold these stories inside of us and they create toxicity, literally create toxicity in our body and absolutely in our mind. And so it's so important that we let go of these stories and we share them in a community of people who are not going to judge us. And so, we shared stories, and then we think about like, how will we share these stories with the public? And it's really up to the woman how she wants to do that. A lot of women are writing poems, some are writing straight up narratives, some are doing like audio visuals or like a video recording of themselves talking. Some women are doing other sort of art projects. One woman, her therapy is really music. So she's like DJing a playlist to include.
Wow.
My story is really based on the quote in the Quran that says, God is closer to you than your jugular vein. And so I'm making a life cast of my neck and to, kind of go along with my story. So there's lots of different stuff being produced out of this, which is great. I mean, the idea of creation is also us remembering that as long as we are alive, we have that creative potential in us, and we can create a future free from bigotry and discrimination. So the women are creating these stories. They're then going to go on the website. The website will serve as, both an archive and, a platform that we can then use in community events, both online and in-person events, where we can share some of these stories live and some of the other components of the project.
So there'll be, I guess, an archive of artifacts associated with each cohort, or how are you thinking of sort of curating the artwork that comes in as a result of the work of these 99 women?
Yeah, each woman will have her own page on the website. And so it will include like a headshot of her, a short bio, and then her story. We're working with a website designer to make sure that it, looks really good and that it's accessible, easy to use, but that's how, we will include everything on there. Yeah.
So,
and so
how do you find, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's important to also note that the women in this project all identify as activists or advocates. There's a lot of different narrative goals that we have in this project. And I think one of the things we know about Muslim women is that they're often represented as either victims or villains. And yet in my experience, I am an activist. Most of the Muslim women that I am really close with are also activists who work on a wide variety of social justice issues. And so it's important to me, in the same way that I have dealt with these issues of bigotry, it's precisely those issues that fuel my passion to fight for justice for myself and for others. And so that is kind of a common experience that I want the women in this project to have, is that we are both trying to heal from these experiences, but we're also trying to amplify the fact that we are people who are transforming our society for the better. And through that, also amplifying all of these incredible Muslim women-led organizations that people just, don't fully know about. KARAMAH is one of them, Heart Women and Girls, Vigilant Love, Justice for Muslims Collective, Muslim Wellness Foundation, Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, and many others. I mean, these are sort of the communities of women who we are hoping to get into these workshops and tell their stories. Also, so that they can go back and use this website for their own programming, right? Like how can they use this to, create community connections and amplify the important work that they're doing.
No, I agree with you absolutely about the need to have representation by Muslim women who are active, and not all necessarily just in Muslim related organizations, because there may be Muslim women whose passion is the environment, or it could be art, or it could be anything, and they're also activists in their own way. And it would be really fascinating as the project gains speed to be able to map some of the links between the various networks. But I guess you're kind of starting out right now. So how did you find these women for your first cohort? And what's your plan for finding women for subsequent cohorts?
Yeah, so the first cohort was really curated in collaboration with the other 99 Clay Vessels team members. So maybe I will say something about them. When I first kind of hatched this project, the first person I talked to is my good friend Homera Ziad, who is the director of the program in Islamic Studies at Johns Hopkins University. And when I was telling her about my idea, she immediately said, there are all of these poems in Islamic history that reference the idea of clay and fire and water as metaphors of spiritual transformation. And she said, I want to put one of those poems in each of your pots and sort of include that as another healing resource. So I thought that was fantastic. And so she became, the poetry curator and translator for the project. And then we pulled in Sabrina and Jai, the psychotherapist, asked her to do the storytelling piece. And then another beautiful woman in our community, Sasa Akil, who was one of the contributing writers of I Am the Night Sky and Other Reflections of Muslim American Youth, which was a book published in 2019 through Shout Mouse Press here in DC. And she is a multimedia artist and poet. And so I asked her to be the reciter of the 99 names. So she will create, a video and audio clip later of that So it was really conversation between us, like who would be great to include in this first cohort. That's how we came up with that group. Now we're just working with community partners. You know, this is a sort of invitation only project. Because honestly, like 99 seems like a really big number, but there are like way more Muslim women activists out there that could be part of this project. So we're trying to be really careful to make sure also, again, like these narrative goals, that we're really representing the kind of Muslim community that, you know, we want in the future, which is very inclusive, very diverse, and doesn't sort of reproduce some of the, you know, stereotypes about our communities.
Well, I'm sort of reminded about how when President Obama became president of the United States, he was the message that, you know, the United States is changing. And I have noticed that Muslim women in the United States are really becoming much more visible just in the last couple of years. And I think it's partly as a result of the background work by so many organizations that have been working to involve Muslims in the wider community of, you know, American life, but then also these people gaining traction. So tell us a little bit about your plans for the next few months. Do you have a schedule through the end of the year? Is there something particular you're trying to focus on?
Yeah, we're trying to just do a lot all at once. So we have workshops scheduled now every month, once a month through, I think, February of next year to get through all of the cohorts. We're changing the model just a little bit. So the first piloting session was we met once a week, every week for 5 weeks. We're now changing it into like a 3-day intensive. So it will still be the same number of hours, but just doing it over 3 days because it's just easier for people to schedule. I mean, folks are so busy, but also to give them like even more of an immersive experience in this community building piece. So those are all scheduled. And now we just need, you know, we need supporters, we need sponsors of the cohort. So, you know, we are in conversation with a number of partners. For example, Duke University's Islamic Studies Department reached out and said that they wanted to sponsor a cohort of women artists, specifically artists, which is fantastic. So we're pulling that group together. They will run at the end of July. And then we're just looking for other community partners to sponsor more of these cohorts. We still have fundraising to do for the recitation piece. So we want Sasa to do a like graphic video and her own sort of interpretation of the 99 names and create an art video that can also be shared on the website and used in, you know, programming events. Homera is finishing up the curation of the poem. She hopes to have that done in August. But she also has some funding needs around securing permissions for some of those poems, for example. So lots of pieces, the designer of the website. I mean, there's lots of pieces here that still have to get completed. And then we also need funding for events. So the idea is not that this just lives on a website, but that we use the components of the website out in the public throughout the country over the next year and really just share these stories. And the stories are so incredibly humanizing, which is really the point, right? And that's the first part of countering the dehumanization that we have been through over the last 20 years, is really making those connections. So
yeah, I'm old enough to remember the AIDS quilt and how it started and people were contributing so many pieces. Eventually it became too big for one quilt, you know, and so then they had bits of it that sort of went on tour, and then eventually they brought it back to DC and put it all back together again, had this huge, enormous quilt that was practically the size of a football field. So do you, I realize this is still a work in progress, and there may be people who see this video who come up with interesting ideas, and hopefully at the end we'll give everybody information about how to get in touch with you. But do you think of doing a sort of on the road where you take some of the vessels with you and, set them up someplace and use some of the material that's been curated, or what are some of the ideas you're working with right now?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I can literally put the pots in the back of my car. I mean, they all fit in a couple big plastic containers, so I can easily take them with me. Yeah, I love the idea of these events where people can see the pots. Some of the women, locally could get up and share their story. We could read some of the poems. We can talk about like what has happened the last 20 years that people just don't hear about. The criminalization and dehumanization of our communities. How was 9/11 used as a pretext to, create a lot of suffering in not just Muslim communities, right, but Arab Christian communities, Sikh communities, South Asians. So many communities were affected by this. And so we're not trying to take anything away from the, memorials that exist and those stories. We're trying to open the vessel and create like a more inclusive understanding of what happened, of all of what that event unleashed, in multiple communities.
To me, one of the really promising aspects of this is that it challenges preconceived notions about what Muslims are, and specifically what Muslim women are, by actually allowing us to tell our own story in our own voices.
Yeah. And to that, I also want to say it's so important to know that this project is not just about, telling stories about Muslims who were victimized by non-Muslims. This is also a story of intra-Muslim bigotry and discrimination that has been exacerbated by Islamophobia, that has created this problem where we say, like, we can't talk about racism in our community. We can't talk about misogyny or anti-LGBTQ
attitudes.
We can't talk about any of that because we're dealing with all of this pressure from the state to criminalize our communities. And this project is saying no to that. No, we have to talk. Justice, is working towards justice is messy business, and we have to do it all at the same time. We're not lining up in any queue. We have to talk about those things. So important to say that some of the women sharing in this project are talking about, victimization that has come from other Muslims.
Oh yeah, no, it's a real thing. And it's infuriating when you see it. A lot of it, again, comes from ignorance, but it's important to educate people. So it's an ongoing thing. So I'm just wondering, speaking again about the nuts and bolts of it, obviously you've just had your first cohort and you're learning, and as you say, tweaking the actual program itself. But we're sort of transitioning now from the year of COVID, when everything was remote, to possibly a future when we can have either hybrid or fully, physical events. What's your plan for the cohorts for the rest of this year? Still fully online, virtual?
Yeah, the workshops will all remain virtual, and that really right now comes down to a funding issue. Each cohort costs $11,000 for the facilitation fees, and to make sure that each woman gets a modest stipend for her time. And so if we were to do it in person, we would then have to kind of layer on additional funding needs, which right now, like, we can't do. If the possibility opens, Sabrina is based in Baltimore. So if we, get a funder who will do a Baltimore-based project, or like a Philadelphia-based project, and only Sabrina would have to travel, like, that is a possibility. I think I'm more focused on events, in locations where we could pull a group of women together to do some sort of live performance.
Well, the sky's the limit. Clearly, you and your collaborators are a bunch of interesting and inventive people. So we'll see what happens going forward. I hope you keep KARAMAH apprised. But anyway, before we end, could you please share some photos of the 99 clay vessels projects with us? I'd love to see some of the vessels you created, also the process of creation, if you have something.
Of course. I'm going to share my screen. And I can just show you, let me fix this first. So I'm just going to quietly go through these so that people don't hear my voice. And you can just see this is sort of pictures of the whole process of how I created them.
I love that. I have so much potential. Okay. About how many vessels would you get in one firing?
Oh, I could fit, actually it was about like 33, which again, is interesting because, it's divisible into 99. Yeah,
because they're different sizes and shapes. I was just wondering how many times you had to fire that kiln to get them.
It took me a year to make these because I first had to make a batch and kind of experiment with different firing methods till I figured out which one I wanted. I mean, I literally made about 300 vessels altogether by experimenting. Then a number of them broke because this firing method is also like temperamental. But finally, I did get my 99. I have a couple extras in case any of them break.
Persistence. Oh gosh, how beautiful. This is beautiful. I just feel like reaching right into the screen and taking one out and holding it.
That's a beautiful thing to say, because that's actually the point. It's that our society is being destroyed by the way that we forget, our sacredness, and how do we create those kind of intimate connections with one another so that we can remember? We are, living in a society where we're just constantly compelled to forget. And so we have to actively find ways to remember, going back to that idea of vicar. And so, yeah, it's important. I want people to touch them, I want them to hear the stories. I want them to hear the poems and let that like soften people's heart. And it's in those openings that we really have like our greatest creative potential. Yeah. Yes.
That's wonderful. And so, again, I just feel like I could go on forever and talk about so many other things sort of related to it. But I think you told me you had an audio clip that you might want to share with us too.
Yeah, I thought it would be great to hear a little bit more about the stories. So, again, the stories are really diverse. We have one woman who is a representative in Delaware talking about, in the Delaware Congress, how they were, there was a Muslim prayer. And she was so deeply touched to hear the Muslim prayer, like in that space. And then immediately, one of the other Congress people stood up to talk about, how dare you bring this religion into this space? And just the real pain.
Talk about whiplash.
having to experience that, the humiliation of that. Another woman whose daughter came home from school, 9 years old, sort of realized that this was right after Trump's Muslim ban. And she came home sort of realizing the bigotry against Muslims, and so innocently said to her mom, I'll just not tell people that I'm Muslim and tell them that I'm Mexican instead, because her family is half Iranian, half Mexican. And her mom had to explain to her, there's a whole lot of bigotry all around here, and it's all connected. So she wrote a letter to her daughter, sort of talking about that. And, a number of different poems, another woman talking about a very prominent Muslim community where the sheikh victimized a number of people in the community, and she was one of them. And so she was talking about her experience of spiritual abuse. And again, because of Islamophobia, not feeling like she could fully speak out against that. But this one actually is coming from the executive director of your organization, and a very playful poem, sort of a reflection of Sojourner Truth's.
Ain't I a woman?
Exactly, that's right. So I will play this.
Ain't I a Muslim Woman by Rama A. Abdul Alim. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, I am. Ain't I a Muslim woman? No, I'm not married yet, but that does not make me less than. Ain't I a Muslim woman? No, I'm not a mother yet, but that doesn't make me less than. Ain't I a Muslim woman? No, I don't have a sheikh, but my leader is Imam Warthi Muhammad. May Allah grant him paradise. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, my WD Muhammad community has always valued the input of the women in the community. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, Imam Muhammad encouraged us to be traditionally educated, and that is why I became a lawyer. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, my African American identity is strong, just like your ethnic identity. Don't make something Islamic when it's actually cultural. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, we have special foods from our community too. Let me share my bean soup and bean pie. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, I was born for the mission. My community elders told all the children that as we were growing up. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, after years of struggle, I have finally found my mission, which is to educate and empower Muslim women. Ain't I a Muslim woman? No, educated Muslim women will not be the downfall of the Ummah. By not educating women, the Ummah has been fighting the misconceptions and misinformation about Islam with one hand tied behind its back. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, the Quran clearly stated that Allah gave KARAMAH, dignity, to all the children of Adam. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, the Ummah has let patriarchy corrupt the universal message of Islam. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, Islam is gender equitable, and I don't need to be saved from it. Thank you very much. Ain't I a Muslim woman? Yes, I'm an African American leader in my community, and I am a Muslim woman.
MashaAllah.
It's so beautiful. And I love how each of these could be learning tools. Like you could just mine that poem now, for people just to learn so much more about the complexity of our communities. And I love her rendition of that. It's just great. She has such a powerful voice. And
she does.
And all of the women in this project. I mean, honestly, I cannot wait to share these stories because they are just, every one of them is so powerful.
Well, before we close, could you flash that little slide that has your website on it?
Oh, yes, yes.
I want to make sure that everybody knows where to go. And I know you're looking for big money, but I'm assuming that small dollar donations are also welcome. Of
course. I mean, again, I really want this to be, these are just some close-up pictures of the pots too that I really love because they look like the cosmos. Yes, in terms of donations, of course. I mean, as I said, this is this is meant to be an inclusive project. We want people to participate in this however they can. So yes, we would love bigger donors to step up and say, this is an important project. This is an important archive and we want to support it. But if community members, can support us at any level, like we would be honored. I would love to have just a, really long list of people who support the project to also show that, this is owned by everyone. This is something that everyone feels really compelled to be a part of.
Yeah, I know. And well, all I can say, honestly, thank you so much for sharing the photos and the poem, and for agreeing to be our guest today. I wish you every success with this very important and timely project. Inshallah, it will continue to grow and spread Allah's healing grace upon us all.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
It was fun. We hope you come back and tell us about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.